We're just going to make sure people are muted. I think they are. Good evening, everyone. I'm Chuck Tironi, the Conservation Administrator for the town of Reading. And tonight we'll be holding a public meeting with a Zoom link. So it's hybrid. And every application tonight will be discussed, and there'll be an opportunity for people to make comments after that discussion. I will turn it over quickly to Martha Moore, the Chair of the Conservation Commission, to take attendance and review tonight's agenda. One last note, please realize that this meeting will be recorded, and that you should be aware that people can pick up what you say and yourself on the screen. Thank you.
Okay, I want to just go through the roll call of the.
Recording in progress.
Okay, I'm going to go through the roll call of the Conservation Commission members. First, the people who are on Zoom. When I call your name, please answer. And we'll start with Bill.
Bill McCants, member present.
Angie.
Andrew Driven, member present.
Walter.
Walter Talbot, member present.
Tony.
Tony Rotalakis, member.
Brian.
Brian Bowe, vice chair, present.
And I'm Martha Moore, Chair, and I'm here. And we have a short agenda tonight. We're going to start with a presentation about a dog park proposal by Stephen Cool. We have Zero Small Lane is not going to come after all, so we're going to need to vote to continue that hearing. 413 Main Street is already continued until October 25th. And then we will get to 451 Pearl Street and discuss the Meadowbrook access easement and old new business. And we have some other discussion items. And then we have 2 sets of minutes to vote on, August 23rd and September 13th. And just for the record, I was not able to be present for the meeting on September 13th, but I did get to watch the second half of it on RCTV, and I did watch the first half of it on YouTube. So when the time comes to vote on anything that was discussed at that meeting, I have caught up on the meetings and will be able to vote when that time comes. Okay. So Chuck, are we ready to, and it is 7:05. And are we ready to start with our first presenter?
Yeah, just a note. You said that the recording caption was on the screen. I don't see it on any of these screens here behind me, so it's not going to be us this time. It may be RCTV that doesn't check it off, but
Right.
I have mine on both the room and myself.
Okay, this is a recording.
Yeah.
It was blocking the screen at the last meeting. Yes. Okay, well.
Okay, so without any further ado, we should introduce or have Mr. Stephen Cool introduce himself.
Thank you, Chuck. Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. For something over a year now. Oh, do you have the presentation to put on the screen?
Who are you gonna ask that? It's the one thing I didn't get. Why don't you go through it a little bit? I'll run down.
Okay, I have a thumb drive.
Yeah. I only have a. Okay. Let me get that.
So for something over a year now, I've been promoting this idea, the dog park for Reading. I guess it started last July, a year ago in July. And I spoke about it first at the Ashland Road meeting. And it began to roll from there with the assistance of Fidel Maltez, our town manager. And I forget exactly at what point Chuck became involved, but Chuck Tyrone has been invaluable. We have looked at a number of different locations together, and in every case, he has looked to see what our boundaries would be with respect to conservation issues, water locations, that sort of thing. So it's been really helpful in understanding what we might be able to do with the various locations we've looked at. They include, right at the beginning, Memorial Park, which because of deed issues was not a hill that we felt we could climb. And we've looked at Hunt Park. We've looked at many other locations. Jumping ahead, we're looking right now primarily at 3 locations. Simon's Way, the western little area, and we're looking at Washington Park, and we're looking at Birch Meadow Drive, an area just to the west or left of Birch Meadow School. So we have a substantial dog population in town, and when we can see a few slides, I can give you some numerics on that. Chuck and I have spent a great deal of time together talking about this, looking at options and the Conservation Commission ramifications of it. I don't know if he has briefed the commission on what we've done or where it stands, but I'm happy to entertain any questions while we're waiting for a few slides that you all might find interesting. The latest 3 locations we're looking at, I believe I'd say that 2 of them, I guess, have definite Conservation Commission issues associated with them. Simon's Way, clearly. We were surprised at the amount of water we were seeing there after some rains. And I suppose Washington Park really, at least I haven't seen any issues, or any issues from Chuck so far with that. And then Birch Meadow, when Chuck and I looked at that location, we did find some water in what appeared to be wetland area a little beyond it. So I don't know if we have some exact figures yet, but there's a fence that goes along the property on the left or west side of the property. You have Birch Meadow School here, you have the property, and then there's a fence, and Chuck was doing some very careful measurements and said it looks like we'd have about 35 feet additional space beyond the fence. So if I may make a few points, is there a clicker for me, or shall I just ask you? Okay, so ahead, please. Next slide. So just to give you an idea of the population that a dog park would affect, we're looking at perhaps 3,000 or more households in Reading of the 10,000 or so having at least 1 dog. And these figures are from Laura as of this last July. So there's a substantial population that would benefit from a dog park. Next, please.
Oops. Did I lose the screen? I did. Sorry. See that again.
What the fuck?
You delete, mute the people that need to be muted.
I'm not on Zoom,
Oh, I'll get that.
sorry. Didn't want any feedback.
Well, I can just continue on.
Oh, here we go.
We have it?
I should have it in a second.
for some years, my wife and I would take our dog, now dogs, to Wilmington Dog Park. And it's a well-planned dog park. In other ways, it's not well-maintained. It's about 20,000 square feet, 13,500 square feet for all dogs, and about 6,600 square feet for small dogs, older dogs, dogs that, you know, really can't tolerate being with other dogs. And it works pretty well, except for the fact that the town, unless something changed recently, refuses to put in a garbage can for waste bags, if you can believe it. And of course, they refuse to do any waste bag pickup, so it's a mess. So, you know, I don't know if that is under their Conservation Commission's purview, but I think somebody needs to look at. This is an interesting dot plot, scatter plot here. This was done by Matt, our GIS administrator, and it shows us where dogs are located in Reading. And the larger the dot, the more dogs there are right at that location, whether it's a single family home, apartment house, condo, that sort of thing, multifamily dwelling, you know, 3 or more family units. So you can see there's kind of a concentration toward the center of town, which suggests that Washington Park, which is relatively near the red star, if you can make it out there, which is the weighted center of the dog population. And so Washington Park is relatively close to that, so that gives it a certain advantage. Whereas Simons Way is kind of farther up toward our right and a little bit remote for everyone in Reading. Birch Meadow School, because of the focus of the town on the schools there, is a good location. It's so well known. Next, please, Chuck. There are a lot of benefits that may not be immediately obvious to having a dog park. Certainly, it's a benefit for the dogs, socialization, playtime, and all, but also it gives families something nice to do. And we've found over the years of going to dog parks, people learn a whole lot. We've learned a lot from other dog owners, and with what we know, we've been able to pass it on to other dog owners, whether they're experienced or novice. Next, please. And here's a key item. If we can make application by the end of December of this year, we can get up to $275,000 for the design, $25,000, and construction, $250,000 of a dog park. So that $250,000 will pay up to 90% of the cost of construction. $25,000 is just flat. So the town, in many respects, can get a virtually free dog park. So unfortunately, Stanton Foundation says they're stopping giving these grants out as of January 1st. They have now given out 40 some around Massachusetts. So they have really benefited the dog population. Next, please. There are a lot of factors that make a very functional dog park. Waste bag dispensers and trash cans, of course, like I mentioned, but a lot of other things. You all have received this in your packets, I believe, so I won't enumerate these things, but there are a lot of things a lot of details that go into making a very good dog park. Next, please. I mentioned Wilmington. It has a sandy surface, and it has some trees, and it has some play devices. Somewhere beyond it to the left, I suspect is conservation land. Otherwise, I'm not sure there's too much more to mention about Wilmington. Can we move ahead, Chuck? Peabody has a lovely dog park, but it was apparently designed more for people than dogs. It's a lovely place. But for example, if you see that area at the left of the dog park that's sort of tall, pink, and white stripe on each side. It's not really for dogs, it's for people. And inside the two dog areas, they have cement and some obstructions that I really personally wouldn't deliberately put in a dog park. So they've done a lovely job, but it's not, I don't think, well designed for dogs. Next, please, Chuck. And another image of Peabody. And if you could just step through the remaining ones there until we get to a text one. We're just showing some layouts and acreage, if you will, square footage of various dog parks in the area. There are some novel things associated with some of them, like Billerica has a couple of pools for dogs. And let's stop here, Chuck, for the dogs. Billerica also has a covered little pavilion, which is nice on a very sunny or a rainy day. So one of the key criteria, or a couple of the key criteria for where we put a dog park, is safety, to use it and to access it. And we would like it to be convenient to get there, whether it's by car or by foot. Certainly Washington Park is convenient on both counts for the majority of people. Simon's Way, not quite as much. We need water because dogs will drink a whole lot. Parking, the most dogs I typically see at a dog park is 5 or 6. However, I see that go up to 10, 12, maybe 13 dogs at a time. At a little presentation I made to the Recreation Committee, one of the gentlemen there said he had seen the Wakefield Dog Park have 50 dogs in it. But that dog park is so small, it's around, I think, 10,000 square feet, and it's dangerous. It is hazardous for people and dogs to have that concentration of dogs in that small area. So a reasonably sized area is, yields safety for people and dogs. Can we go to the next one? So this, as I mentioned, we've looked at a number of locations. We even looked at Celestine Park. I think that was the first location that Chuck and I had a look at. And at that time, he was helping me come up to speed on the requirements for proximity to a conservation area. Next, please. Looking at Washington Park, it's a bit congested where we might be able to put a dog park. And in this slide, I tried to see how far from home base would the fences be, and a high school batter, according to several folks who've been coaching, I understand that they can do well more than 400 feet when they hit a drive. So we've been looking at some novel approaches here, like, for example, toward the left of that red box is a basketball court. And it's been suggested that out of this $250,000, perhaps we move the basketball court over. So we gain land for a dog park there. We also gain a new basketball court. When we were looking at this, it looked like around 14,000 square feet if you ignore that area D outlined in yellow, which no one much liked the idea of, because that would have encroached on the baseball outfield. So, but that's Washington Park. Can we step ahead, please? And so now we're looking at Simon's Way. Chuck and I have one. Let's go to the next one and maybe the one after that, Chuck. Chuck, okay, good. So Chuck and I have looked at this area that's blue there, and he has gone deep into the outback there to check and see where it looks like the area of concern to the Conservation Commission would be. And in some ways, it looks a little bit better than we imagined, in some ways less. But in total, it looks like around maybe 15,000 square feet. But those of y'all who've been there would know that it's a very, how shall I put it, hilly little area. There's a lot of undulation in the ground, so there would be more construction effort needed there. But by putting it there, as Chuck has pointed out, it would also, as a byproduct, provide some nice, how shall I say, amenities to the skating rink area, lighting, perhaps, some other things like that. So can we move to the next one? So that's just another view of it. And next, please. Birch Meadow School. Let's go to the next one. I think I've got an outline. Yes. So the red and white dotted area is kind of the gross area that we looked at. And we would like to, I would like to see us gain some land north of that, above that. There is an area which isn't completely obvious. That is a playground there. And then that's up in your upper right-hand corner, and to the left would be some conservation area to the left of the red box. But that would, to me, that would be a very good place for it because the land is relatively flat. It has a little bit of elevation to it, but that's okay. It's almost, you might say, bowl-shaped, which would work well for a dog park. Can we go to the next one? Yeah, pretty much the same.
Can you go back just a slide or two?
Of course.
In the Birch Meadow Master Plan, that picture, they're
Yes.
taking some of that area that you're thinking of as dog park and proposing parking lot.
Yes, that was pointed out to me by Jenna Fiorente when we first started talking about Birch Meadow. And I've gotten some, I would say conflicting, but some different points of view on that. There is parking in the area, so I don't want to put words in Jenna's mouth, but my impression from Jenna was that we could do with less parking or work out another parking scheme if we were to be able to put it there. And of course, that's up to the school committee.
Mhm. And the dotted lines to the far left, is that the 35-foot wetland boundary?
I'll have to,
Sure. So we checked, I was out there with Stephen Cool, and we did walk out to where we thought it was wet. I'm assuming that straight line that goes from north to south on the screen is the property line. And it looked like there was a wetland 35 feet from that property line. So what we're seeing here, this aerial look, I don't know where this came from and don't have any information on it being delineated by a wetland. So maybe it's just an aerial. So things would appear from my site visit to be closer, 35 foot from that property line. So the other thing I would note is that from the site visit, I would let you know that all of the parking is on the school property, not on the adjoining property, which is jointly held in care and custody by the Recreation Department and the Conservation Commission.
Okay, so the school property is everything to the right of that straight line, including the imagined parking lot that's drawn in this picture.
Mhm.
And the conservation property is to the left of that straight line.
Conservation/recreation property, yes.
Okay.
and at first I was under the impression from, may have been Jenna, but I can't say for sure, that the town controlled the part of the property that's pretty much under the yellow dotted line, and then the school controlled the property above that. The school board control the property above it, but I think it's all controlled by the school department up to the fence.
Yeah, and the dotted line migrates into the neighborhood, so I'm not sure where that came from, the dotted line, but it certainly goes well beyond what is imagined to be school department property.
Mhm. Okay,
Yeah. But if all those things would be sorted out during the design phase of the project, if in fact it was awarded to the town.
So the continuing support of the dog park, it clearly needs DPW support. And these are some of the necessary activities that would go on. And we ready to move on? That could be my last slide, I remember. Here we are. So.
All right.
Any questions, please?
Can we just jump in?
you can go first.
Okay.
And if people.
I have a few.
Hold on.
Oh.
Members of the Conservation Commission who are on Zoom, also please do your hand raise and I'll call on you in order back and forth with people here. So Brian, go ahead.
Okay. These are one I just jotted down while you were talking, so
Yes.
probably not all comprehensive. So you talked about the grant being 250K and that being perhaps 90% of the total. So what do you think it would take to make a good and proper dog park? And while you're at it, you talked about the different sizes of ones in the area. What do you think is a good target size for a dog?
I'll answer that one first.
Why is it easier?
What?
No, never mind. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think 20,000 square feet is very good. You get much larger, then you lose control. You can even lose sight of your dog, like at Gloucester. It has, for the all dog area, amongst its 4 areas, it's long and kind of slender, so you can't see what's going on at the far end.
Yeah.
So obviously dogs can leave waste there, or they can get into fights, or who knows what. So 20,000 square feet on a relatively flat, or let's say bowl-shaped, if you will, area gives you control. And if there's a fight or something, you can run up to the dogs pretty quickly. 10,000 square feet, as Wakefield has for all dogs, as I said, to me, that's hazardous. I've been there a number of times, and you have dogs doing what Jim Sullivan calls zoomies. They're running around in circles, chasing each other, or just having fun. And you've really got to keep your knees flexed at all times.
I'm aware of that, yeah.
Okay, sir.
So that's maintenance, that's construction costs. What are you thinking for maintenance? Who would do that? Where would the money come from?
Well, many dog parks, if not most, have an active Friends of fill in the blank dog park. So Gloucester has one. And they even have a little building, not very big, it's probably 10 by 10 feet, right at the entrance to the dog park. And they keep waste bags stored there, and rakes and other things. And then the Friends of the Gloucester Dog Park group, very often you'll find one of them there, and they're walking around making sure that the waste bag dispensers are full, making sure that people are abiding by the rules. For example, no spike collars. A dog is supposed to be licensed to be in any dog park, licensed and vaccinated properly. So they're supposed to keep track of this. They'll look for unruly dogs, people who aren't being careful about their dogs and ignoring the dogs as the dog makes a mess. So the Friends of Fill in the Blank Dog Park, they do a lot of that sort of thing. Now, resurfacing, for example, depending upon what the surface is, maybe it's sand, and over time, as you're picking up dog waste and all, the sand kind of disappears. So the DPW would need to come in, I don't know, maybe once a year and put down a new, or add to the cover, the ground cover. Let's see, if there's damage of any sort, like, let's say there are trees in the park, tree limb comes down, DPW would need to go in.
So basically, it's volunteers,
Yes,
probably through the Friends of, who do all the policing. And by policing, I don't mean police, but
well, I understand,
making sure people pick up, making sure they take the bags out.
exactly.
What happens if the people don't do that?
Somebody else usually does, because what you'll find with any dog park is there's usually a core of people who are there frequently. And I know when we were going to Wilmington Dog Park for several years, when we went home, we might take 3 or 4 waste bags with us. And there were other folks there who would come in and police the area. And we would, like, we left a snow shovel there one time, because you need that occasionally for one thing or another. People would bring in dog bowls for water, because they don't have a water station there, so people have to manually bring water in. I won't say it's self-sustaining, but there are enough people who are really community-minded that they'll keep a place, even like Wilmington Dog Park, relatively clean.
Okay, and 2 related questions, which will be my final one, I promise, Walter. So you were talking about the population that you think is ideal for one time at the dog park. So the 2 parts are, what number of parking spaces you think would support the ideal population?
Okay,
And again, who polices the ideal population? You know, you don't want a situation like you described in Wakefield. So who closes the gate, if you will?
I've never seen anyone thrown out of a dog park because there are too many dogs already. That again is kind of self-policing, because we've gone to, I'd say, Wakefield Dog Park, and another one that I can't think of right now, could have even been Wilmington. And when we got there, we thought there were too many dogs. And I know Wakefield, or I'm sure it was Wakefield, we just left. And then Wilmington, we went in for a couple minutes and it was too chaotic, so we left. So it's kind of self-policing in that sense. When the dogs are well-behaved, which is usually, you have a dog come in running in and they're all excited for a little while, then they calm down, they sniff around and they, just enjoy themselves calmly. But
So how many parking spaces do you think are needed to support that level of self-policing?
if we're looking at Washington Park, it would be fewer than, let's say, Simon's Way. So for 5 or 6 dogs, which is kind of the number that you usually see, 4 or 5 parking spaces, maybe 5 or 6 parking spaces.
Okay,
If you're-
the reason I asked that, and I recognize it's not it is apples and oranges, it's not the same. So we take our dog to the town forest a lot.
We do too.
Obviously a bigger area and everything, but there you, especially on the weekend, you can have over 20 cars there at a given time.
Yes.
So do you think that is even remotely possible that a dog park would attract that kind of attention? Or do you think the fact that it's town forest and so much bigger is what accounts for the numbers?
Well, the town forest is about 300 acres,
Yeah.
as I recall.
Me too.
And so that's about 600 times the size of the Wilmington dog. Acre being 40,000 square feet.
Okay, so the size of the dog park itself and the number of parking spaces would be the limiting function anyway.
I would agree with you on that. Yeah. I mean, if we're looking at 15,000 square feet and, typically maybe 5 or 6 dogs there, if we had 5 or 6 parking spaces, that could work. Now, the times when there would be more dogs would be maybe the mornings, because people will go to a dog park before work.
Yep.
Afternoon, after work, So, anywhere from, let's say, 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock. And then weekends, it's a little more distributed during the day, I think, on Saturday and Sunday. I can't say we've ever had a parking problem anywhere we've gone. But parking is an issue.
Depending on what site it's chosen.
All set? Walter?
Thank you. I must preface my comments by saying I've only lived in Reading for 2.5 years. I'm a double dog owner, and I'm actually very disgusted with how poor my fellow citizens police their dogs. And I'll speak specifically like Memorial Park and around the library. Now, your scatter plot shows there's a lot of dogs in the center of town. Those are 2 places that are center of town. What is going to prevent continued non-policing of people picking up their poop? And the second comment I would make would be, I would definitely be against the Birch Meadow location because you're cutting down trees. Thank you.
So there's always an issue of people ignoring it when their dog makes a mess. And that appears to be a big problem in Washington Park from what people have told me. Having a dog park there would reduce that problem substantially, I think. You'd have waste bags, the waste bag dispensers, and you'd have the park there. If there were waste bag dispensers at Washington Park now, maybe that would reduce the problem a little bit. But I really can't speak to any solution for Washington Park as it is now. And what was your other question, sir?
He didn't like cutting down trees at
Oh.
Birch Meadow.
My understanding is that Conservation Commission requires that if you want to remove a tree, that you are required to put in another tree or some number of other plants as a replacement. And so that's certainly something we've been discussing at each location, Chuck and I.
Bill?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for your thorough presentation, including the slideshow. Very helpful. Been the dog owner for over 20 years and happen to live near Washington Park. Have visited dog parks in multiple states, California, Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, New Mexico. With that experience in the last 32 plus years I've lived in New England, I am persuaded that having a dog park in Washington Park, for example, would have the beneficial effect you're describing. And so I just wanted to say that for what it was worth. I also appreciate Andrew having a lobbyist in the background on the couch there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew or Tony, do either of you have comments or questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
And I'm new to this commission, and so I haven't been a part of this conversation before. Why does Reading need a dog park? Are there access issues? Are there leasing issues, inadequacy of sidewalks? Is this something the dog community wants as a social element? What's the driving force behind this?
Well, that's a good question. Having spent years walking my dog around the neighborhood and she'll drag me downtown and all over the place, it's not exactly the safest thing to do, to walk it on city streets. Having a reasonably convenient dog park is a great alternative because dogs love to say hi to other dogs and play together. So I think there's a safety aspect there. Y'all have brought up the issue of Washington Park and people not policing their dogs there. So having a dog park gives them an alternative so they don't have to go to Washington Park and be a bad neighbor. maybe on one of the slides, is where I put it. I was Googling, of course, and I found one site that talked about dog parks, and it was a good solid site. They said that property values seem to be influenced 5% by the presence of a dog park in town. I don't know if that's true, but if I were a dog owner and I was looking at where I wanted to move to, and there were a dog park here and none there, it would help influence my decision. Any other aspects of it that come to your mind that you'd like me to comment on?
No, I'm just curious as to,
Okay.
why, what from from where this idea originated, what the need was, because I'm probably the minority here where I don't have a dog. I'm probably the only commissioner with.
We can get you one.
I don't have a dog either.
Oh, you don't?
I don't.
Sorry.
Puppies to the next meeting. But, the number of households, we're looking at almost a third of the households in Reading who have at least one dog, and we have up to 5 dogs in one house, according to Laura's records. So, that would be a great benefit. We have basketball courts. I don't play basketball, but I'm fine with having basketball courts, and you don't have a dog, but some of your neighbors do. And so I think it would be a benefit to the town to have it.
Of these 3,000 households with dogs, how many people do you think would actually use the dog park?
There would be a small number that would constantly use it. I've seen this at all the other dog parks, but every time I go to a dog park, I see somebody new that I haven't seen there before. And we frequently go to the Gloucester Dog Park, occasionally to Wilmington now, although not that often. And then, we'll stop at some other places, in part because I want to know what what the other dog parks look like and how they function, because of what I'm trying to do here.
So it's mostly a small core of repeat users who.
There will be a small core of repeat users, and there are probably people who would be members of the Friends of Reading Dog Park, for example. And then you've got a lot of people who come occasionally, maybe once a month, once a week, something like that. So, I can't give you statistics like that, but.
And the Walter mentioned that at Birch Meadow, there would be a number of trees that would have to get cut down. And it looked like there would be some amount of vegetation removal at the 2 other properties that you talked about, at Simmons Way and at Washington Street. Also, did I see those maps correctly?
Washington Park is less tree removal. In fact, I'm not sure we actually identified any trees that we might want to remove. Washington Park, we talked about moving the basketball court over. So we get a new basketball court and.
But would moving the basketball court require cutting?
No, because you could move it over. There's about a basketball court's worth of space west of the existing basketball court. And I actually, I was making a slide of that earlier today because I have a couple more presentations to do. And there is space to the west of the basketball court, or as you're facing Washington Park to the right of it, that wouldn't require removing a tree. There are 2 lovely old growth trees right in the middle of it all, and a couple of large rocks, and then a little memorial stone with a couple of military folk remembered on it. That would all have to stay there. So, we might want to put a little fence around it, something like that, to keep the dogs from running into the trees or, making a mess around the trees.
And as far as lighting, do these require any nighttime lighting, or are these only operated?
Very few parks have any
to dusk?
nighttime lighting because, there's not a lot of reason to be there before dawn or after dusk. But for example, if we were going to do Simon's Way, I think we could justifiably include lighting because it would also benefit the Simon's Way parking lot, the Simon's Way area in general. Washington Park, I don't recall seeing lighting there. but perhaps we could justify it for them. That would open it up for maybe some evening use of the playground. For example.
We are going on pretty long. Do you have
I'm-
anything else or are
I'm all
you
set.
all set?
Finish
Okay,
my-
and I know Andy's had his hand up, but let's try and wrap this up quickly. Andy,
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Steve, for presenting. I appreciate all the work you've done to this, or for advocating for the dog park. And I was primarily, I had Chuck bring you here because I was interested in what you were wanting to propose in Simon's Way. And I think the site that you're focusing on is probably a good spot to look at, just knowing what we've been talking about at Simon's Way. But of the three you've mentioned, I like Washington Park. The more that I've been hearing other folks talk about it, I do have 2 dogs actually. And the idea of being able to walk to it for me is, I'm not a big dog park goer, but if I had one in town that I could walk to, I might be more usable. I'm not a big person of driving somewhere with my dogs, but so that one sounds really interesting. And then Washington Park does seem, every time I go there, it seems like it could be so much more than what it is. I'm not sure the dog park is the answer or not, but are you aware, are there any other discussions of what might happen at Washington Park? Or is there really nothing on the table?
Well, our tentative plan or idea, let's say, is remove the half court basketball court. The only use for it, as far as I've heard so far, is people bring their kids to the playground and then they sit on chairs on the half court. But they could just as well do that on the sidewalk. Not the sidewalk by the street, but the sidewalk that's next to the playground. So there would be that, probably some relocation of an existing sidewalk. And as I suggested, possibly the movement of the basketball court. No one seems very interested in moving the fence that defines the baseball outfield.
But as far as is pickleball trying to put some courts there, or are there any other people that are trying to claim that area of?
I haven't heard of pickleball looking to use Washington Park. I have not heard of it, and I attended a recreation committee meeting a couple of weeks ago where there were about 20 pickleball folk there. And there was some discussion that I listened to, but I didn't hear Washington Park mentioned. I think it's more Simon's Way and might be another area, but of course I'm not very focused on the pickleball issue.
anything else, Andy, or are you all set?
No, I'm just curious how you choose a site, or which, it sounds like you choose 2 sites potentially. But
Sorry, could you say again, sir?
oh, sorry. How do you choose the sites that you want to put in the application?
The Stanton Foundation has expanded what they'll allow us to do from 1 site to 2 sites. So if we can say these 2 sites are being considered and we will choose one of them, then they would consider a grant application. In the past, it's just been 1 site, very simple. So it's not up to me, obviously. It would be up to the various committees and commissions in town to come to an agreement. And then I guess the select board, in consultation with the town manager and the Conservation Commission, would decide.
Okay, well, you got your work cut out for you. Thank you.
It's been cut out for me for a year now. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I will wrap it up with just one question or comment from me. I'm a little concerned about the proximity of the dog park to the children's playground at Birch
Yes.
Meadow, because I know there are some children who are scared of dogs. And so you would want some sort of buffer
Exactly.
of woods between the children playing and the edge of the dog park.
We've discussed that. I've discussed that with several people, including Tom Wise, who's the chairman of the school committee. And one of the things that I've mentioned is we use a double fence a chain link fence, but a double fence, so little fingers and snouts can never reach each other,
Mhm.
and put a barrier of something like arborvitae's. Jenna has suggested a solid wall that would increase or let's say, decrease the distraction level. Kids to dogs, dogs to kids. And it could, reduce the transmission of sound as well, to further reduce distraction. So you bring up an excellent point.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, a double fence, if it's only 2 feet apart, that's gonna be closer than some kids would be comfortable with. If it was 20 feet, that might be more appropriate.
Well, the double fence is only for fingers.
Yeah.
Fingers and snouts. But the real separation would come with arborvitae's or a wall, or arborvitae's and a wall, or maybe the double fence. Maybe it's not a double fence, maybe it's a solid fence
Mhm.
between the areas.
Yeah, but
But that's definitely a big consideration, because our first priority is safety.
okay, I think we're good. And I think you do seem to understand that anything that you build would have to be at least 35 feet from a wetland. And
Yes.
we need to make sure that we protect the wetland from people flinging dog waste bags over the fence into the wetland and
Oh,
things like
yes.
that.
Yes,
Yeah.
and Chuck has been my muse on this, and he's always, bringing up these points and, keeping us on the straight and narrow.
Okay, all right, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Right. All right,
Thank you, Steve. Yep.
our next hearing is Zero Small Lane, and I understand they have asked to continue to our next meeting.
They've asked for a continuance till October 25th.
October 25th, okay.
I'll make
Can
a
I-
motion to continue zero small.
Be-
25th.
Hold on.
Before your motion, I have one other question that I wanted to convey to Chuck, because it's not a question for the applicant, it's a question for the town. Looking at chapter 41, section 81L, which has to do with the subdivision control law. Chapter 41, section 81L. A subdivision is defined as meaning the division of a tract of land into 2 or more lots. And a lot means an area of land in one ownership with definite boundaries, used or available for use as the site of one or more buildings. Now, there have been understandably questions from the commission about, well, what's going on here? Why are there 2 buildable lots? The information we have from the CBDC shows that in 2020, they tentatively approved that. So my question is a simple one. If they decide that it's not the site, it's not the division of a tract of land into 2 or more lots that can be built on, does it fall under CPDC jurisdiction at all? My reason for asking this question is I want the Concom to be careful about staying in its lane under the law. I understand our concern is about wetlands and so forth, but when it comes to how many buildable lots and so forth there are, that's CPDC jurisdiction. So I'd like that question asked as part of the other questions that are being asked. That'd be nice to know at our next meeting, and now I'll defer back to Brian with his motion. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hold on, which piece of property are you asking about or referring to?
I'm referring to the plans that Chuck put up that show there's 2 lots. There have to be 2 lots, otherwise it's not a subdivision. But we've been
what
getting
what
questions.
street address? Tell me what street
Zero
address.
Small Lane.
I'm talking about Zero Small Lane. That's why I'm
Thank
talking
you.
about this now.
Okay, I thought you were going back to dog park. Okay. So-
No, that's why I wanted to make this statement. Sorry, Martha. This is why I wanted to make this statement before we did the motion, because to me, this is a very important point of clarification. Chuck put up documents from CPDC from 2020 showing, as expected, it's a subdivision because it's the division of a tract of land into 2 or more lots. And a lot is defined as something you could build on, right? But Andrew has understandably been asking about, well, wait a minute, why aren't you considering a single family residence? And I want to be clear about what questions we're asking that are under Concom jurisdiction and what falls under CPDC jurisdiction because it's a subdivision. That's all. Thanks.
Okay,
All right, so
we'll make a motion to continue Zero Small Lane to October 25th.
Bill McCants, I second that motion. Bill McCants in favor?
This is Andy, just in response to Bill. I don't think the land is currently subdivided yet. It's Zero Small Lane. It's 1 lot. So
Andrew, that is not what the document that Chuck put on our website says. I invite you to look at the document that the CPDC issued in 2020. It talks about 2 lots. I'll just leave it at that. This is not the hearing, but that's what the document says. I'm not imagining things. Thank you.
Bill, you're taking this to. We have the ability to ask them to consider a single family home. I do not see in any situation where we cannot ask that. And if we disagree with this, that's not between the applicant and us. That's amongst
Andrew, this is not a hearing. You are now getting into the substance of a hearing that is not before us. I was asking a question of the town. I was not starting a debate about Zero Small Lane because this is not a hearing. Thank you.
It is a hearing.
All right,
I would like to, I'm going to abstain from continuing on this one.
okay. Walter?
Walter Talbot says yay.
Okay, Tony?
I'll move to continue. I'll vote to continue.
Okay,
Brian Bowe in favor.
Martha Moore in favor. So 5-0 and 1 abstain. Okay. And we'll see if we can come up with an answer to Bill's question before October 25th. Okay, 413 Main Street has already been continued, so we do not need to vote on that one. And so now we're up to 451 Pearl Street. And the applicants were here. Are they still on Zoom?
Yeah.
There they are.
There you go.
Okay. And let me read the blurb while you get set up over there. Okay. Open the public hearing on a notice of intent filed by Frank Federa pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Wetlands Protection Act and/or the Reading Wetland Protection Bylaw, Section 7.1. The applicant proposes to raise an existing dwelling and construct a new single-family dwelling and driveway. All of the work is within the 100-foot buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland and intermittent stream. The application and plans can be viewed during regular business hours at the Town Hall Conservation Office, 16 Lowell Street, Reading, Mass. 01867, and on the Conservation Division page under the project by year, Assessor's Map 46, Lot 15, DEP file number 270-0776. Okay, and welcome Frank and Giovanni Federa.
Welcome. Giovanni Federa, I'm representing Frank, the applicant. I'm the project engineer. And I can just share my screen just to go over the plans. But so the project is an existing single family home. The current impervious, so we have resource areas. I'll show the survey first. Oh, over here. The notice of intent up. So the plans are right here. So this is the existing site, single family home with the driveway on the north side, and a patio in the back, some walkways in the front, and a shed in the rear. But the total impervious area on site right now is about 3,900 square feet. All the, the majority of the site is within the 100-foot buffer, and the resource area is an intermittent stream. It was flagged by Williams and Sparages back in 2001, and they got the top bank of the intermittent stream, and that's what we're using as the the boundary and set forth with the 25-foot zone of natural vegetation, 35-foot no builds, and so on. So the proposed project will raise the existing site, raise the existing building, and it will remove these two trees located right here. Those two trees, they're about 24 to 36 inches in diameter, and they're large pine trees, and I have some pictures of them in the notice of intent application. They are right here, fully matured, but as you can see, they do have a they span out a good amount of distance, and even to the existing house, they do kind of fall on top of the existing roof, and so getting that much closer, it would just be detrimental to the trees, the roots, and the overall, life of the trees, and to the structure, the new structure itself. It could be a potential hazard to the new house. So those trees are located, let's see, I think they're outside of the 25-foot zone of natural vegetation, within the 35-foot. So they're about 28 to 32 feet away from the intermittent stream. But the proposed house, it will stay in compliance of the buildable area. I mean, from zoning and from the Reading bylaws, the wetland bylaws. So we will be staying outside of the 35-foot no build zone. And on the north side of the site, we will be staying within the, or outside the 15-foot side setback. So it does meet all the compliance of the location and whatnot, So as for the proposed impervious area, it's going to decrease from the existing conditions. So as I previously said, existing conditions impervious area is 3,900 square feet, and the proposed conditions is about 3,700 square feet. So we're reducing the impervious area, which is good for stormwater. But in addition to having a reduced impervious area, we're also adding a stormwater infiltration system right here on site to help create a better environment and overall projects to help improve the site as an overall project, right? Promoting groundwater recharge, etc. The site's topography it is relatively flat with a slight pitch to the rear and kind of towards this back corner over here, towards the intermittent stream. So the soils are a hydrologic soil group A, which are well infiltrated soils. So it's good for stormwater recharge. The shed will be redone over here, and there will be, so removing these two trees, there will be 4 new plantings, and they will be located right here. They will be within the 25-foot zone of natural vegetation, and those trees will be of caliber 1 3/4 to 2 inch in caliber, but we will be planting 4 of them, which is greater than the 1-to-1 ratio. These trees are the ones that are most readily available, and locally available as well. So that's it's a very straightforward project. We will be adding straw wattle silt fence around the perimeter of the site, just to ensure that any sediment will not be going into the intermittent stream. It will be captured, it will be controlled, the site will be totally controlled. That straw wattle silt fence will be on the down gradient side, pretty much on this south side of the property. Don't know if I have too much more to add. That is definitely the summary. I'm happy to open it up to the commissioners and answer any questions. If Frank has any input, he's happy to jump on, but happy to open it up from here. Thank you.
Anybody in the commission on the Zoom call with questions? And I can't see if they have their hands raised.
Yeah, Gio, can you take down the screen share so we can see?
Absolutely. Sure.
Thanks.
All right, so Bill, Walter, or Andy, any questions or comments for the applicant? Andy?
Yeah, I'm hoping, Tony, or maybe Chuck could explain this more, but so it's an intermittent stream, but then we're designating, the 25 and 35-foot buffer zones for the natural vegetation and then the no structure zone. But what are we buffering if it's an intermittent stream?
Tony, Chuck, okay,
We're actually buffering inland bank.
So there is a 25-foot buffer zone that we would expect to see for the inland bank. Is that our understanding, Tony?
Right, you have the stream channel, and then usually at the first observable break and slope, that's where you define the inland bank. And if you have a bordering vegetated wetland, it would be bordering the inland bank. You don't always have to have a bordering vegetated wetland. You can start measuring buffer zone right from the top of the inland bank in the absence of the BVW.
Okay. So if that's the case, and that's what we have on the drawing, I would like to see that 25-foot zone reestablished with natural vegetation and not grass. And that's my major comment at this moment in time.
When we did our site visit, it looked like there's a fair amount of newly planted grass right along the side of the yard near the stream. Do you know what the history of that area is before it was newly planted with grass?
I do not, but maybe the applicant Frank may know. Maybe if he wants to answer this one.
Yeah, Frank Federa Jr., applicant, owner of 451 Pearl Street. The abutter to the south took it upon himself to cut branches and trees, and it was just a fall cleanup. And I basically took maybe 2 or 3 branches that were just cut and left on the ground, part of my fall cleanup. And I just applied some grass seed to the area. It was always grass. As long as I've owned the property, the grass went all the way to the edge of the stone embankment. And I just basically restored it to where it was when I bought the property.
And how long ago did you buy the property?
2002, I believe, 2000.
Okay,
Yeah,
so about
2002,
20 years.
2003.
Okay. All right. Okay, anybody else on the commission with other questions? Brian?
Giovanni, in the front right of the property near the street, there's a cluster of 5 trees. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And you're showing them on the plan as remaining, and yet we were there. They were already showing some signs of stress. One of them at least had a significant lean. One of them was missing some, what looked like fairly major branches, not too far off the ground. What is your expectation for that cluster going forward?
It is to remain, and we don't want to remove more trees if we don't need to. So it's not in the way of the new curb cut. It's totally out of the way, and we feel that they can stay. And I can pull them up on the street view if we want to see them. But we do see
That's okay. No, so
Okay.
do you know, are those town trees by any chance? Did you have that checked out?
Those look like they are within the private property, as it shows on the plan.
Giovanni, can I add something?
Absolutely.
Those are private property, trees. And I had some concerns with respect to one of the trees actually falling down on the overhead power lines. I got the town involved, and the tree warden came on site and he confirmed that they were private property trees, but I do have some concerns about that one particular tree overhanging that power line. If that goes, it's going to take the power line down, whether it's the existing house or the proposed house. That is the direction of the feed going to the proposed house as well. So I just wanted to add to that. You know, there is a concern with that one leaning over the power line.
So do you think that you're likely to leave it the way it is and cross your fingers, or do you plan on taking some action in the near future?
Well, we didn't really want to propose taking any more trees other than the brittle pine trees that are there now, but it's a concern I have, and if the board's receptive, we could certainly omit that one tree on a revised plan. But it's a concern that I do have, yes.
Oh, I understand why you would want to minimize the trees you show being cut. At the same time, if you're basically going to turn around shortly after the project and cut down one or more of those 5 trees, I'd rather know that now. I'd rather have that be part of our understanding of the big picture. So do you think you're going to leave those trees as they are, or do you think it's likely you're going to take down at least the one that's threatening the power line, or what are you thinking?
I mean, I think if the board's receptive on allowing us to take that one tree down that is leaning over the power line, then I think maybe we should propose that in the plan. I don't necessarily want to take that whole cluster down because it doesn't really affect the project.
Okay, so if you think it's likely that you want to take one of them down, I think you need to do a plan change to show that you already are replanting more trees. That's why I think you're covered from that perspective, but
Sure.
let's have the plan be as accurate as we can get it.
Yep, that makes sense.
So I don't see anything on the plans. Is there any rear exit to this new building?
There is a basement slider that allows access to the rear of the property.
And where does that come out?
It is in the north section of the building footprint, the foundation footprint.
Let's show this. Maybe you can show it on the plan. So Frank, where are you?
So you see where the deck is?
Right here, yes.
It would be under the deck.
Okay.
Okay, and speaking of the deck, Giovanni, you were saying you're going from 3,900 square feet to about 3,700 square feet. Is that including the deck?
That is pervious area, impervious area, so it does not include the deck.
Wait a minute, I didn't get that. So is the deck counted as part of the 3,700, or is the deck in addition to the 3,700?
The deck is not included into the 3,700 square feet.
Okay, because I believe on even one of your projects previously, we talked about land underneath a deck, and if it couldn't have natural growth, we were not considering it as
Degraded. We were not, yeah, it was not considered, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Land under a deck would not be considered degraded. or it is considered degraded.
It is considered degraded. Okay.
Yes, that is correct. But as for pervious, where stormwater and runoff can, penetrate into the ground naturally, it still can in that sense.
Okay, so Chuck wants to weigh in on this.
Yeah, so my recollection was that's what we were trying to establish, and the commission that was sitting at that time decided that decks are pervious because we cannot guarantee open slotted decking boards anymore. Most decks, the joints are tied up against one another.
So it is impervious.
I think that was the determination, and I thought that would continue, but I guess we could make that determination again. But I laid out the reasoning.
Right.
Back in the day, it wasn't ever the case that the decking boards were tied up against one another. But I don't think it really matters if you have more square foot.
Yeah, not in this case, but I just wanted to clarify that number.
Right.
So where are you planning on having stockpile, and where are you going to put things as you tear it down?
That would be furthest away from the intermittent stream. I would say probably up in this corner. And if, that would make the most sense in my mind. I think Frank would agree.
Yeah, we would keep everything, we would flow everything off the construction site where the existing driveway is, and have trucks and materials back into that area and keep that basically the entrance of the construction site.
Okay, so as long as you're doing a plan update anyway, adding on it where you plan on keeping things would be useful, your stockpile area. So one last topic for me is in the back right of the property. There's a fair amount of cut wood, cut logs. Any idea where those came from, Frank?
Again, as long as I've owned the property, it's all been, my property has all been pretty much grass. It appears that for the past 20 years that the neighbors have had some kind of tree cutting war where they would cut things down and put things in different locations. So, I don't know, they're not on my property, but
So I'm
I
not
know that,
Frank,
they come from the neighbors.
Okay, hang on a second. So that's on quote unquote your side of the stream. So you suggesting the neighbors would put them across the stream?
Well, it's not on my property, but it's on the other side of the stream that is adjacent to my property. That was done by the neighbor to my south and the neighbor to my, the neighbor to my south, exactly.
That's interesting. Okay.
He basically, when he put the fence up, again, I had eyewitnesses that were living at my house that were basically telling me that when he put his vinyl fence up, basically cut these trees down and just plop them on the other side of the stream.
Okay. All right, I want to say Martha.
Okay, when we were there, I noticed that there was a dead pine tree in the back right corner. Do you have any plans for what to do with that?
That's another tree that I would say is a hazard. It's been dead for probably 15 years now. And it's just a matter of time before it just topples over. I'm very receptive on taking that down while I have the resources to take the other trees down. I think it might be a good idea just for safety purposes.
So my question for that tree, same as the cluster up front, if you think you're going to want to take it down anyway, why wouldn't you already have it be part of this plan? Especially if you plan on using the resources that are only going to be deployed, why wouldn't you have a completely accurate plan?
Because I wanted to get the board's feedback on that. It's not something that I want to do, but if the board is receptive on it, then we will go ahead and make the changes.
But it's not up to us to design your project. If that's something that you plan on doing, put it on your plan and we can assess it along with everything else, rather than going through the whole approval process and then after the fact, you're taking down an additional tree or two.
Mhm.
And it also saves you the necessity of coming back to the board in a few years when you're ready to take it down.
Yeah, I would say if we were to add 2 other additional trees, it would be the one over the power line and the one in the rear corner that's dead.
Yes, if you're going to do it, add it to your plan, please.
And Bill has had his hand up for a while, and I apologize. I saw it before the screen share, and then I didn't get a chance to call on you. So Bill, what do you have for comments?
No problem. I wanted to second what Andrew had to say about the zone of natural vegetation. Of course, you have the planting of 4 new trees, red maples, on your site plan. Thank you for that. I had a chance to view the property this afternoon, knocking first, of course, but there was no answer. But we like to see a layered approach. So we're interested in the ground layer, shrub layer, as well as the tree layer. And because of the placement of those 4 future trees, that should go quite naturally with filling out that area and with natural vegetation. So it's something that you can consult with Chuck on. We have many suggestions for that, but we want to see an herbal shrub and tree layer there to protect the resource area, the bank, to the intermittent stream. So I just wanted to add that to what Andrew had to say earlier. Thanks.
Okay.
Could I also comment on the
Yeah,
plan?
Tony.
First of all, I wanted to recognize that you've done a pretty good job of avoiding most of the major pitfalls by recognizing the zone of natural vegetation and the no-build zone, and that certainly makes our jobs a lot easier. And as a result, I think we're focusing a lot more on the minutiae instead of the big picture things. So in that vein, I've noticed that the trees that you've proposed for replanting are the Red Sunset and the October Glory, which are beautiful foliage trees, but they're horticultural varieties and they're not native. Would you consider contacting a nursery for a more native red maple tree to plant?
Frank, thoughts? I mean, I don't see why not, right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I thought they were red maples.
They are, but they're not native. They're a crossbreed and not necessarily representative of what would be growing there naturally.
Well, one of the first questions I asked them, and this is Northeast Nursery, what is readily available? What can we get our hands on? And I also called Mahoney's. They didn't really have much in stock, so I could certainly circle back and see what they have that's readily available that we could actually go and purchase and plant. And we could certainly get back to you if it's available. I have no problem substituting with the native red maple.
Yeah, there's an organization, and I wrote their name down, and I can't seem to find it, but it's the Massachusetts Native Plant Society or whatnot, and they usually keep a database of suppliers of native vegetation in Massachusetts or southern New Hampshire. You could try contacting them.
Okay. I think the commission is all a chance. Chuck, what do you have that you want to pitch in on this?
So no, I think the commission asked some very good questions. I would like to have an updated plan, and I understand there was some questions to say, hey, you got to put everything on your plan so we can review it. And I'm not sure how that'll work at the next meeting because it's going to be the commission's first opportunity to see these trees on the plan. But that would be my only comment. We can go over all the all the conditions and all the asks from the commission prior to continuing. But I don't see anything else that I would add.
Chuck, just to clarify, Brian reminded me that the name of the organization is called the Native Plant Trust.
Are you asking not to plant cultivars? Is that what you're saying, or has he picked a red maple?
He's picked a red maple, which is a cultivar, which is horticultural.
He picked a cultivar,
Yes,
and you'd like him to get a true native.
a true native.
Okay, I just want to get it right. Thanks.
Chuck, they proposed straw wattle and silt fence along the stream. Is that your preferred erosion control technique?
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna hold my comment until I see the plan on after the updates, but usually we'd like to see something more substantial. I like the silt fence, that's good. Straw wattle, we don't usually recommend for tear downs.
So what would they
Mulch,
use?
12-inch mulch sock is usually what we ask for.
Okay.
It's a combination of those two.
And I'm questioning exactly where it's located. Right now, they've got it very close to the stream bank, and I'm wondering whether we could pull it closer to the 25-foot line and have the construction boundary edge of work or whatever it's called, closer to the house rather than closer to the stream. Is that something that would make sense, other than, of course, planting the trees, but for keeping the work away from the edge of that stream? Because we know that that stream bank is pretty fragile because of the activities of the abutter to the south. So
Yeah.
I'd really like to keep the construction vehicles as far from that stream bank as possible.
Okay.
So what's the term for
Limited work.
limit of work? Yeah, I'd love to see that limit of work more like at the 25-foot line rather than close to the stream. If you can manage to do your work, you're coming in at the driveway at the north end of the property. If you could limit your limit of work to be 25 feet from the stream, that would be awesome. All right. Are there any members of the general public that are listening in that have comments, or do we have nobody else on Zoom right now?
I'm the abutter to the north. I have no issues with the proposed project.
Could you state your name and address for the record?
Sure. Grant Keefe, 459 Pearl Street.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other members of the general public here who have comments or questions?
Could use the reactions button and the raise hand function so we could recognize you. You could also turn your video on and just wave to us if that works.
Okay, I guess that's it. So we've requested a few things from the applicant. Would you like to request continuance so that you can add these things to your plans and get back to us?
Absolutely. I can have these revisions done, very quickly, and the next available meeting, we'd be happy to be a part of it.
Okay, that would be October 11th, I believe.
Okay.
Anybody want to make a motion for that?
This is Brian. I make a motion to continue for 51 Pearl Street to October 11th.
Let's just make sure we have the request correctly before we vote. So I'll just read mine and you guys can add to it. Reestablish 25-foot buffer zone with a layered approach. Show the stockpile area. New totals for impervious, now that it includes the deck. show all trees that are to be removed. Replant with true natives, no cultivars. And then show the limit of work / erosion control line. And that should not be on the bank. And is there anything else that I've forgotten about? Stockpile area, did I say that?
Oh, straw wattle changed to silt sock.
Although I thought you wanted to wait till you saw the updated plans.
Well, I wanted to see it on the plan, but
Oh, that's fine.
we can say, so when you establish your limit of work, which is your erosion control line and your limit of work, it should be only far enough away from the work for you to have enough access to do the work. So you can't put it way on the bank. I would be concerned if you dug in the silt fence on the top of the bank. So that's usually 10 feet on the side of the house, 15 feet at the most, but if you could make it closer than that, it would be great. So
Do you think it should be outside where the trees are going to be planted or between that and the house construction?
well, I think for the house and for the digging and all that, it could be closer to the actual work. When the trees are planted, they could move it.
Okay, yeah, I like that.
I mean, you could have a condition to move or have 2 rows in that area. I mean, the bank, the stream's right there. It needs to be reviewed, so.
So Giovanni, did that make sense to you?
Yes, so you would have basically a temporary location of the straw, silt fence. Just for plantings, and then it would be relocated at that point.
Yeah, and depend on what you're going in there with your plantings. I noticed, I don't know if others picked it up, but we're only planting 1
Trees?
3/4 to 2-inch, sapling. You might just go in there with a shovel and do that. So you may not need, if that's the case, you may not need additional erosion control.
Okay, but my point was not just move the limit of work and erosion control closer, but also change it from straw wattle to silt sock, mulch sock,
Yeah,
Because
as we're gonna do silt fence and mulch sock.
silt fence and mulch sock. Okay, so that's what we wanted to have. Silt fence and mulch sock.
And then just another note, and I guess I should have said this at a different time, but we have a larger caliper replanting tree than what's been here tonight. So just to have the commission understand that and think about it, I guess.
So often we've asked for 2.5 to 3 inches rather than 1 3/4 to 2. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's what it's in the policy, and that's usually what you ask for, 3-inch caliper, 10 to 15 foot tall.
What do you think about that, Giovanni and Frank? Would you be willing to go with slightly larger trees?
That's a great question. I went to Northeast Nursery and like I said earlier, it's what's available. And he basically gave me that list. I could certainly circle back to see if there's anything a little bit bigger. He said that they're more on the 2-inch plus. 3-inch, he doesn't think he could get anything like that, but I could certainly circle back and if we could get them, we'll get them. But if we can't, we'll try to get the biggest ones we could get.
And when are you thinking of planting these? I'm gathering not this fall, but next spring or something like that?
Yeah, I think, upon substantial completion and when we're getting into the landscaping phase of the project, go ahead and get those planted.
Okay, so you've got a little time to look for a bigger tree. I mean, what's available right now might not be the same as what's available come April, May, June.
Exactly.
Well, I also don't want to promise something that I can't get. I mean, the vendors will tell me if they have access to those trees. whether it's now or in the spring, he's gonna let us know if they're available.
If he can go the route of a native tree and the ones that are available are a little bit smaller, maybe we compensate by adding one or two others. Instead of 4, we had 5 or 6. And I think in the long run, we're better off with native trees that are a little bit smaller, maybe a couple of years behind, but that will eventually catch up and I think provide a much more robust and more native habitat.
Yeah. Or if we're going with the native trees, we're also asking for the shrub and the herbaceous layer. We want to make sure we are including those. And I'd like to make sure that the trees are far enough apart. Like, I think in the past, we've looked for something like 20 to 25 feet between a red maple, because they get pretty big. So I wouldn't want to crowd too many in along that one boundary. I don't know how many feet of.
So large canopy trees is what Martha's talking about. So if you have something like that, I actually think that, Frank, you can put in make some calls and find some stuff, but there's a lot more than the commission asked for than just those trees that you're talking about. So that zone of natural vegetation, and to reestablish that, you are going to be making some calls and need to plan out what that looks like. So that may not be quick, and you may not have the expertise to do it. So needs to be reviewed. It's going to be part of the review that this commission goes through, being so close to that resource area. So find the plan, put it together, find what you're putting in there for vegetation. And then I guess what I've heard is people are putting in requests right now for next spring.
Okay, so Chuck, you're saying he should talk to his source, Native Plant Trust, for example, and reserve some trees for next spring?
Yes, I'm actually saying it usually doesn't go, hey, this is all I can find.
Mhm.
We are going to accept a planting plan with an established amount of trees in it that have a certain caliper that work together, and it's going to be approved by the Conservation Commission. And then it's not up to the commission to find it. They should only be thinking about the best, restoration that can happen next to the bank. And then you would come back and say, yeah, we approve this, but I need a minor plan change because none of this stuff's available, but this is what's available and this is what I can get that's closest to what we approved.
That makes sense.
So that's typically what ends up happening.
Okay, so when they come back on October 11th, they should come back with a planting plan of what would be the ideal thing that we're looking for. And you do your best to reserve those plants for next spring. And if you can't get them at that point, you come back with a minor plan change to say what you are able to get, and we look at that.
Yeah, so a tree between 2-inch caliper and 3-inch caliper would kind of be in that zone that we expect. If it's less than that, maybe you build your planting plan around those size, and let us look at it. And if you can't get any of those, then like I said, it would have to be the minor, the plan change option after you've tried to find these.
If we've exhausted this exercise and I could get my hands on native trees that are not the 2 to 3 inch caliper, but more on the 1.75 to 2-inch caliper, is that something we could put in the plan to get approved on?
Well, we want those true natives in the plan already. That's a request from one of the commissioners. So let's find out what you can get, including next spring.
Right, so I think the order is, you now know what it is we're looking for, what we want. And so your plan should reflect that. Then you try and get those plants reserved for the spring. If at that point you have an issue, we could consider it, but in the meantime, the plan should reflect what it is we want, which is the bigger caliper. Okay,
All right, anybody else with questions, or are we good to, we had a motion to continue. We did not get a second yet. And then we have a list of 7 things that Chuck put down that we're looking for you to come back on October 11th with those 7 updates. So can I have a second to Brian's motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, second by Tony. And let's start voting up on the Zoom screen.
Bill McCann's in favor?
Andrew Driven in favor.
Walter Talbot in favor.
Tony Rotalakis in favor.
Brian Bowe in favor.
Martha Moore in favor, 6-0-0. Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you for your time.
All right.
Okay. Meadowbrook access easement, any update on that?
No update.
Okay,
I'm, I don't feel like taking it off the agenda now with recent events, but we'll,
Okay.
we'll just leave it there. Hopefully that works out.
okay, no update. Okay, old new business. We'll let you lead the way on this one.
I don't have my agenda, so
Would you like my copy?
thank you. Old new business. Thank you.
Okay, Brian and I can share.
So I haven't heard from Plymouth Road, but I expect that we will prior to, I don't know, prior to the next couple of meetings. They were trying to reestablish an area that had erosion in it. And the enforcements have, yeah, there's no updates on the enforcements. Is that correct?
There's no update. I have been back a couple of times to our friends on Henzy to tell them what we decided last time and have not connected yet, but continue.
So that's all there is, all there is to it. If you want, I could skip over Bill, get these other things out of the way, and then Bill could just have the rest of the meeting to present, if that's agreeable to everyone, including Bill.
Is that all right with you, Bill?
Yeah.
Okay.
So at our next conservation DPW monthly meeting, we are going to have a discussion about some maintenance items that we need at Matera, at the community garden, and for the Trails Committee, but they all wrap around the big question is, the Conservation Commission doesn't have well, for a long time didn't have a budget, and now doesn't really have a large budget. And some of these things, even with our budget, is so far out of our range to take care of. We need the help of the DPW, and they're gracious and have helped us in the past and continue to help us. But there's been some stacking up of deferred maintenance, which has caused issues at the cabin, and that's what we're going to be talking about on October 3rd. And if you haven't known, it was announced to the town, I think Jane Kinsella is stepping down and Chris Cole is taking over her position. So it's just as assistant DPW director is moving into the DPW position. So we all know Chris. We've all worked with Chris for a long time, so it should be an easy transition. Next on the agenda for discussions is just that Tony has asked for us to reimburse him for an MACC conference item, and that's fine. It's $65. I just need a vote on that from the commission.
The name of the course is Fundamentals Unit 208, Buffer Zones, Considering the Science While Applying the Regulations.
I think it seems to be
Okay.
useful.
Okay, can I have a motion?
We have a hand up.
Andrew has a hand up.
No, let's move forward. I put a motion to, what am I saying? here, approve the $65 for Tony to get educated.
Okay,
Second that.
Bill McCants in favor?
Andrew Drippin in favor.
Walter Talbot in favor.
I will abstain.
Brian Bowe in favor.
Arthur Moore in favor. All right. Do let us know what you learn when you
I will
go then.
report back.
Mhm.
and so the only thing left for me to talk about is the Keolis. I received a map of the updated wetlands in Reading. I'm going to add it to the next agenda and put it on the website for review by the commission. And at that next meeting, Keolis will be here. So it's appropriate to talk about it at that time. It's an aerial photo map and we can look at it. I did briefly look at it. It seems like things have been updated. So it'd be good to get the commission's take on it in all those areas that we usually don't walk down, which is most of the train track areas.
Should we be trying to do a site visit? To allow us to look at the map more.
Yeah, it's one I can't make, but I would suggest that you could hit every crossroad.
Well, whatever the new areas that they've added, we should.
Yeah, no, I will let you know that the Millet Psalms and Morgan land is pretty accurate. You can't get in there, and that's really where I work. North of that, Austin Prep. I don't know what that looks like. It was walked between Willow Street and Austin Prep, so I can vouch for that area. But it's really going from Millet Psalms and Morgan back towards the other side of town.
Okay, so we should look at the map individually and then
Look at the map.
use email to figure out a time and place.
Yeah, so we usually have a prep meeting. Maybe you can look at that beforehand and see how we could divvy it up or look at areas and then come up with a plan. I send out my notes. Okay, that's it from here. I think there's minutes and
And a report on the town forest day.
the town forest day, which would be one of the chairs.
That's a quick update.
Mhm.
So the weather was terrible. Hence the turnout was very light. Didn't manage to talk to some people at the other booths, but there was very few from the public that were there. The center of attention seemed to be the table next to us, which was the Ipswich River Watershed Association.
Mhm.
That kind of held sway with their model of a typical town with wetlands and a river and such. But it rained and it was scheduled to go 10-1 and we actually made it to about 12:40. So we the heroes. But if you didn't go, you didn't miss much.
Mhm. Yep, okay, and then minutes for approval. I hope everybody has had a chance to read the August 23rd minutes. And do we have a motion to accept them? I think there were some people who sent things to Chuck. Corrections. I just sent the last name of the person that was on the minutes as Jeff, is Jeff Glover. That was the only big thing on August 23rd. Anybody else, anything they needed to add? Bill?
Yeah, maybe others caught this, just a minor typo on page 3. The last sentence above item 7. There are resources that Mr. McCants is willing, and it should be to look at, not willing. It's currently says took at, that's a typo. So willing to look at and help. And then it says decided, it should be decide and help decide the correct verbiage for this regulation. That's it.
All right, thank you.
Good catch. Anybody else? Okay, can I have a motion to accept the minutes of August 23rd?
This is Brian, I make a motion to accept the minutes of August 23rd.
This is Tony, second.
Bill McCants in favor?
Andrew Driven in favor.
Walter Talbot in favor.
Tony Rotalakis in favor.
Brian Bowe in favor.
Martha Moore in favor, 600. Okay, the minutes of 9:13. Has everybody had a chance to read those?
I have a small revision in section 3 for 15 Temple Street, sentence 5. Mr. Silva said that they were done, it's reported on by the strike agency and replaced with engineer.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yep.
Bill?
On page 3, item 9, fourth line, Keolis was able to, it says TOO, it's a typo, it should just be TO. And then item 11, it should be Martha Moore with an E at the end. They're trying to make you Scottish, Martha. And that's it. Thanks.
Okay, and I sent an email to Chuck earlier today that Ann Martin and Maureen Harold's names were spelled wrong also.
Okay,
So,
I have those emails.
good. Anybody else? Okay,
So this is Brian to make a motion to accept the minutes from September 13th.
Bill McCants, I second. Bill McCants in favor?
Just whoever's writing these minutes, I appreciate it. So thanks for getting that organized, Chuck. And this is Andrew. I approve the minutes.
Walter Talbot not present. I abstain.
Tony Rotalakis, I approve.
Brian Bowe in favor.
and Martha Moore, I watched it all, so I will vote in favor. Okay. All right, so we now can go on to the regulations review and update with Bill.
Yes.
And Chuck forwarded to us that email that Bill sent out on August 25th. And it had the yellow highlighted areas that we were talking about before. And then it had the green highlighted areas that are the updates. And anybody, Bill, do you want to talk about it at all? or-
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. I'll share the document and then, of course, people can speak. And I'll stop at each step because there aren't many left, so people can give feedback as we get through each step. Just to remind everyone of where we are in the process. This is likely the last step at this point. Once we're satisfied with the document, I will go through it, remove the highlighting, and reframe it slightly because it'll be for town council. Chuck will be passing along to town council. As we all know, these are clarifying amendments, so they require less process. There would be a public hearing once we hear back from town council, but it's not substantive in nature. The other thing I want to remind everyone of is of real interest in this last step has been vernal pools. We actually have a lot of flexibility there because Reading has a very broad definition of vernal pool. Section 2C says any pond includes a vernal pool, and that's a pond whether it's permanent or intermittent, which provides for very broad discretion. So any clarifying language we have about vernal pools, we are well covered. Also in section 4.7D of our Town of Reading Wetlands Protection Regulations, it talks about work within 100 feet of a known vernal pool as a buffer zone. So again, as we've discussed in the past, really broad and helpful language. And so we just want to provide clarification as opposed to breaking new ground. Also want to be clear or reiterate, yeah, we're going to do some clarification this time, but several members of the commission have some really good ideas about substantive changes we might make down the line. But we wanted to get this done first. That was the agreement. And then we could think more about that going forward. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share the document. And we'll go from there. All right. So first page where you see yellow, that's ground we've covered before. I changed it from green to yellow just so we could keep it straight. So I'm going all the way to page 3. Our update from after our August 25th meeting, including for but not limited to potential vernal pools. So what are we doing here? What we have is the language, a wider ZNV may be required depending on specific site conditions such as grades, soil permeability, or other impact potential. And so we're suggesting adding to that, consistent with what the commission has done in the past, including for but not limited to potential vernal pools as defined in, and as you'll see, we're proposing adding a section 3J so that we can define potential vernal pools. And again, this is something the Conservation Commission had been doing in the past. As Tony noted, the last time we talked about this document, there was a state document that uses that term, but it's based on mapping and so forth. But it's certainly not an unknown or novel term. Okay, so the rest on page 3 is yellow, but I'll actually, if you have any questions about this, it probably makes sense to wait until we get to that proposed section 3J2 about vernal pools. So let's go on. Again, most of this we've already discussed. That's why it's in yellow and would be removed. But our next bit of substance is here on page 6. All right. So as you recall, the commission asked Chuck to suggest language for section 3D4 that would reflect what Reading routinely deals with in this context. And in view of the more detailed language used by our peer communities, as indicated above, this resulted in the following suggested details, building on our previous clarifying revisions. No new structures or other fixtures that may not require a building permit, including but not limited to foundations, footings, frost walls, and here's where the additional language is based on past practice, retaining walls, pools and pool equipment, fences, patios, sports court, driveways, sheds, or other in-ground fixtures. So I'll go ahead and pause there. And just see if there happen to be any questions about that. I realize we discussed it before, but just in case there's any further questions at this point. And go ahead.
So this goes farther than the original language?
The point made about this is the original language is the unhighlighted, and this is to provide additional clarity. The idea is it had been consistently the case. Chuck, you can correct me if I'm wrong, he deals with these questions at the desk on a regular basis at Town Hall, but also in commission meetings over the years, that this is just fleshing out what is meant by structures or other fixtures. And that, Tony, as I understand, is where retaining walls, pools and pool equipment, fences, patios, sports courts, driveways, and shed comes in. It reflects past practice of the commission. Chuck, I don't know if you had anything to add on that.
Yeah, it's definitely, yeah, Tony, it's the ones that building department doesn't need a permit for. Specifically sports courts are, it's rule of thumb for some of the landscape companies to put those in and think that they just don't need a permit from conservation. So I did add some of these things. Patios and sports courts are needed for sure. The rest of those was just for clarity, but they do come up and it's still retaining wall. No permit needed under 3 feet. Conservation, retaining wall, we always need to know about retaining walls. So that's the difference on that one there.
Right. And so if an applicant did have a good reason to put one of these in, he would or they would need to apply for a variance and then it could,
This is only saying that they need to talk to the Conservation Commission and get a permit possibly. I mean, if it's within the 100-foot buffer zone.
Right.
These things were being put in within our jurisdiction without our knowledge.
And we also had an applicant come to us with a plan where the driveway was inside the 35-foot zone. And we said, but wait a minute, you can't have a driveway inside the 35-foot zone, and they had to redesign their project to move the driveway further from the wetland.
does this apply to all structures, permanent structures, temporary?
So a temporary structure like an above-ground pool, it applies to a temporary structure such as a trampoline. I'm not sure. Yeah, I wouldn't call it. I mean, some people call it.
So some people have definitely brought that up and made the point, especially if it's one where there's gravel and what have you underneath it. Still temporary, but less temporary. So what we've been doing is asking for a commitment to move it when the children are not.
So yeah, as an example, Reading's a big hockey town. I'm thinking in the winter time, when the vegetation has died down, I see a lot of people who build rinks in their backyard. Would that require a
I don't
permit?
know if you'll be happy or unhappy to know, but my predecessor used to require a permit. I never did. I thought that was not needed whatsoever. Temporary disturbance, in my opinion.
I would agree with you on that. I'm thinking of some, other things, a bird feeder, a bird bath. No,
Treehouse, no.
Had that conversation before.
Well, that's my, I'm not saying it's my call. You want to tell me, hey, a treehouse is a big deal now? Well, okay. But a treehouse doesn't.
That's not what
need a
this
building
language
permit.
is. That's not what this language is.
No, we're just, and we haven't captured everything, but we've captured the ones that come up all the time. And I think it will be helpful because then I can point to the regulations and say, what we're looking for doesn't just have to do with footings, frost walls, and foundations. It's a driveway also. It's a walkway, a poured cement walkway or something like that.
And all those sheds. Everybody wants to put their shed right in the back next to the wetland.
Well, should that be in the list?
It is. It's the last one in.
Oh, there it is, the last one. It should be to the end of the sentence.
Well, the other thing is this list does not need to be totally comprehensive.
No, I understand that, but if it's a repeat issue
But
that
these are
comes
what
up,
come up.
if it's a high frequency issue.
I think one of the best things about, one of the best things, we work well with the building department. We're in this, it's like right in the same room. And I hear from Arlington all the time, they're in two separate buildings, different streets altogether. It's always hard to have that communication and things get skipped all the time. So we're lucky for that. But to have it in the regulations is going to be very helpful.
Interestingly, you are supposed to get a building permit for a shed, even though it says may not require a building permit. Sheds do require a building permit.
Under 200 square feet, they do not. And fences under 6 feet, well, actually it's 7 feet.
Okay.
Well, it used to be 6, but now it's the post is a little bit above the 6 foot, whatever, and so they changed it. So I don't know if it's 6'6" or 7 feet, but anyways, no building permit. And that could be just, hey, I'm putting in a fence. Do I need a building permit? No. They hang up. No one tells them about conservation. That usually doesn't happen, but it could.
So it looks like there's another change. I think I'm reading this right. That the term fixture has been added.
It's not highlighted.
No, other ground, that's just. that's
Are
not-
you comparing to
I'm comparing to
the original
the
document?
bylaw that I've got online, section D4.
Do you mean where it says other in-ground fixtures?
It says, currently, I believe it says to protect the integrity of the zone of natural vegetation, including the associated root system and canopy, no new foundations, including footings, frost walls, or other in-ground structures shall be permitted within 10 feet of the ZNV. Am I in the right section?
Yeah, you are. And we had talked about fixtures last time. I could have highlighted in yellow. We had talked about it previously because it was a term much more commonly used by our peer communities and so forth. Where this conversation started on the commission was there was some concern about how clear and comprehensive this language was. The original language, Tony, which you're referring to protect the integrity of the ZNV, including associated root system economy, no new foundations, including footings, frost walls, or other in-ground structures. So we've kept the word structures, but not in ground, and then we added fixtures. But again, that was based on what our peer communities happen to do. So that should have been in yellow, Tony. So sorry about that.
Yeah.
I think it's a good change. I think that what happens to me at the counter when I have an engineer come in, they'll tell me exactly their understanding of what a in-ground structure is. And based on the fact that we've said footings, foundations, whatever else up there that's made out of concrete that helps supports buildings, I'll say what I'm doing has nothing to do with this because you've highlighted different things. So I like fixtures because, again, I'd rather explain it than have someone feel like they could explain it to me.
Okay, are we good? Want to move on, Bill?
Alrighty then. That has us scrolling down to page 11. And this is where I did the research that we talked about in late August. I was going to go back to all of our peer communities, the 17, and see if I could find language that would help us. So looking at that update, August 20th, interest is expressed in defining the term potential vernal pools as added to section 3D2, referring to above. Okay, so I looked at those communities and pieced together the proposed new section 3J2. And again, just to emphasize, we have really broad discretion here because of how broadly Reading already defines vernal pools as ponds which can be permanent or intermittent. So the term vernal pool shall include, in addition to scientific definitions found in the state regs, any pond which, except in years of drought, is blah, 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 goes through the usual language. And what does drought mean? It coincides with an advisory or more severe drought as declared by Massachusetts Drought Management Task Force. So it gives you an objective source. And this is what our other peer communities that address this have done. And that helps with an issue that Chuck had mentioned of, well, you know, people are looking at just the year. It could be a dry year, it could be an exceptionally wet year, et cetera. So how do we deal with that? This is how other communities have dealt with it. Potential vernal pools, as referenced in section 3D2, are uncertified vernal pools that have the characteristics of a vernal pool, and that they're small, often shallow ponds characterized by lack of fish and experience annual or semi-annual periods of dryness. That's what one of our peer communities came up with. So this was putting the three together to try to address that interest that the commission brought up last time and having more clarity here. So any questions about that? So again, it's new language, but it's from our peer communities, and it certainly does not broaden our jurisdiction over permanent or intermittent ponds, including vernal pools.
And just so others know, Massachusetts Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program has set up a very standardized set of criteria that can be presented as evidence of vernal pool species. And this basically constitutes photos or audio recordings of about 5 or 6 different species of amphibians, some frogs, some toads, and salamanders. Evidence of egg masses, evidence of mating, tadpoles, metamorphosing juveniles,
Plus fairy shrimp.
plus fairy shrimp.
Tony, what do you feel about holds water for a minimum of 2 consecutive months? I've heard 6 weeks is enough.
The regs say 2 consecutive months and Natural Heritage says 2 consecutive months.
What does Tony say? I mean, you've been out there. And that's not what I'm talking about. Oh, not talking about what it, like when I talk to others, when I'm taking those courses, when I talk to Leo Kenny or others at BSC or something like that.
So the reason you need 2 months or whatever the set amount of time is because that's the amount of time required for the pool of water to establish, for the species to come in and to lay their eggs and to mate, for the eggs to hatch, and for the tadpoles to develop to the point where they can metamorphose into adults and move on their way. I think 2 months is a safe way to do it. There's some years where it may be longer than that based on temperature and sunlight. So, you know, this year we had a lot of water. I really wasn't out in the field much this year monitoring vernal pools and amphibians, but the temperatures were a little bit lower. We didn't have as much sun. So it's possible, even though we had all this water, that it took longer than 2 months. There may be other years where it's very warm and the tadpoles can metamorphose very quickly, maybe 6 weeks. But there's also typically multiple species that are using a vernal pool also, so you'd want to capture the life cycles of a couple of them.
So
I don't have any published studies that I could recommend or support a 6-week period.
Seems to me we want to go with whatever is established by other organizations, if it's Natural Heritage or DEP or whatever. I think that makes sense to keep their language.
they're very careful, as you might know, very careful. So careful is pushing the line up the hill, you know, closer, or no, I said that wrong. Pushing the line closer to the well, in other words. So they want to make sure that there's no doubt that this is a vernal pool and there's no doubt that that's a wetland. That's how the state organizations do it. Just letting you know that what we're reading here and what's been established through is safe.
Okay.
And
But it would be defensible to go with
absolutely.
rather than 2 months.
But when it says 2 months and we're talking about potential vernal pools, I always felt like it might be a potential vernal pool. It didn't have the water this year. It may next year. So how is that covered? Or it may not happen for a couple of years. There might be, let's take the veterinarian's hospital, the vernal pools all over that place, but there was a lot of activity also. So that breeding habitat was compromised and it might not have been so active in the last couple of years. So that potential vernal pool and the ability to reference a few years may be helpful if we just don't want to have someone come in an opportunistic time and take advantage of that.
Well, and that would be an advantage of saying 6 weeks to 2 months and makes it more likely we could protect a vernal pool or even a potential vernal pool.
Well, the potential vernal pools, you're not going to see you're gonna see a depression and you're gonna see signs of water and blah, 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 you know, something like that. And it's not really gonna be there, but it could be. This is a good location. There's others around it. Makes sense that maybe something could happen here.
So how would this get enforced? An applicant comes, we review the property, the commission takes a site walk. They see a depression with some water. We say you have to hold on for 6 weeks to see if any frogs or salamanders are mating in here and if the water stays that long? Or is this more of where a member of the public would come in and say, you know, I've been out here before. At night, I hear amphibians calling. Here's a recording of them.
I would say yes, except for the recording. It's not likely you're gonna get that, but public testimony is a big deal.
One of the recognized pieces of evidence from Natural Heritage is an audio recording of amphibians chorusing.
Which is easy enough with your smartphone.
Yeah, with a
Yeah, but so no one's coming in when someone drops an order of conditions on us to say, oh, I recorded. Now, if we wait a year and then they do it, well, yeah, they're gonna have a recording, but no one's going around recording these things.
Well, besides, I can't imagine if that,
I'm just saying, in that situation, you're not gonna get everything. You have to kind of understand where it is. This testimony about someone hearing like chirping frogs and.
but you have to prove the location as opposed to just, I captured some chirping frogs and they could be anywhere. Right, I mean, so just, I mean, I don't know how powerful that evidence is.
Well, I've done numerous amphibian calling surveys. I can speak to amphibians in about the language of about 7 or 8 different species.
You can speak to them.
I can understand them. And sometimes you can just get it from the roadside.
Okay.
And where most of the properties in town are single-family homes that are abutting the road, it may be.
But
It may
we're
be
still
fairly
accepting that they
straightforward.
recorded it where they said they recorded it.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
Right, but if an applicant comes and we do a site visit, the commission does a site visit and they suspect potential vernal pool, say it's the end of the spring, it's starting to dry up a little bit, is the commission going to ask the applicant to hold off for a year?
No, we've never done that. So we've asked them to go out there and get a biologist to check out this area and then look at that evidence. I mean, that can always happen. Usually when it's close or in December, something like that, they may say, you know, we should find out. And those have been delayed. That's what's happened in the past. So a potential vernal pool may not show vernal pool characteristics in this year or the next, but I mean, it needs to be said that there might be something there to review. And again, when it comes in and it's a one-off situation, you know, we're both not crazy. I mean, I get it. This is going to be a little bit harder to convince us. But if there's 2 or 3 around it or in that area, or, you know, they're already mapped and someone finds this spot, I have to tell you, I would be curious to find out what goes on, and it should be checked out.
And sometimes we've protected potential vernal pools just because the applicant is anxious to get approval and they're willing to give us the 100-foot buffer without proving one way or the other. And it's easier to just say, we'll protect the 100-foot buffer and we can move on with our project.
Okay. Thank you.
Are we good? Can we leave this language as is and move on, or do we have any corrections to make?
I was hoping some corrections, but from Bill, do you see any vernal pool corrections, potential?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I really have nothing to offer because this is the best I could do based on what the peer community said. I hear what you're saying. Chuck, I just haven't happened to see language that would encompass that from the peer community's or elsewhere. So I really don't. I mean,
I think now,
if you think it's possible that perhaps you'd be able to look, I mean, you have decades of experience with this, and you happen to know of a town that has language like that, that's definitely something we could look at. Just doesn't have to be something I've seen.
So this is Andy. So maybe for now, I like the idea of trying to use this definition of a vernal pool, but since it seems a little Chuck in particular, and I get it, I'm a little uncertain, maybe we don't move forward with it, but Chuck, I like where you're coming from, and the way I'm reading it, I think what you're saying would still hold, but it's just not clear still. So why add this if it's not adding that level of clarification at this point?
so we could reach out to Leo Kennedy. I don't know if anyone knows who that is, but he is still around enough to ask him what he thinks, but not to really get super in depth in this. But just trying to read it quickly and trying to figure out where we can make a change that would be satisfying.
And you know, I think Chuck, if you had someone to consult with, you could easily provide this paragraph, because it is all the languages from the peer communities of Milton, North Andover, and Westford. It's not something we made up. And so getting an expert to give some input, you know, could we make a clarification here that'd be helpful to protect this interest you're describing? That wouldn't be time consuming. It's something we could briefly touch on next time, assuming we've covered everything else. And I don't think it'd really hold things up that much.
Yeah, I was only thinking of adding just for the potential vernal pools, and I can do that. And that's a great suggestion. Something like in this year or the next, or something like that in a 24-month span. And that would at least get you beyond a construction project.
Sure. So if we could be specific, right? I mean, if we wanted to address this tonight, because there's some interest in moving on.
Yeah.
If we look at this paragraph, where might we insert that would make sense?
It seems
Yeah,
like
right.
I kept on looking at different as referencing and have the characteristics of a vernal pool with it, and then right there within that 24-month span or something like that. But it doesn't really work with what's surrounded. But
What about at the very end of the paragraph, after periods of dryness, add as observed over 2 seasons or 2 years or something like that?
It's a pretty big time burden on the applicant, right?
no, it's they always have the option to bring in a wildlife biologist who can go out there and look for caddisfly and, you know, shells and eggs and all this other stuff that don't happen during this time that would be there under the leaf litter. And so they can say, hey, it's nothing here. I think that that's always an option, but otherwise.
I see what Martha is saying. It seems to me that it could work. If you think about it, that last sentence, we're letting the reader know what the definition is of potential vernal pools. Uncertified vernal pools that have the characteristics of a vernal pool, et cetera, as observed over a 24-month period. I actually think you could add that there without really changing anything else, but addressing that interest you brought up.
I think that seems to satisfy what I was looking for. And
Yep.
So moved.
Is 24 months
I'm
enough
just-
for you, Chuck? It sounds like you're thinking that some of these might even be kind of stagnant for years and then, but yeah.
That's
Not-
true. That's true, but it's also like the vernal pool habitat is 1,000 feet or 1,500 feet, and we can
Yeah.
only, we can only really protect 100 feet. So I think that's the best we can do based on the life we live in.
Being reasonable, yeah,
And that, better than what we have currently.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it gives an opportunity, and again, they always have an opportunity to, the preponderance of credible evidence.
So do we want to add 24 months at the end of that final sentence?
Yeah, what I have so far is periods of dryness, comma, as observed over a 24-month period. That's what I understand the modification to be. Is that right?
Well, there are criteria also for identifying vernal pools when they're dry. And as Chuck has mentioned, caddisflies are one, dragonfly larvae, another, fingernail clams are a third. Those is that sufficient, do you think, to identify something?
You want to put in something like that, preponderance of credible evidence is to overcome that. I mean, yes, I do. I absolutely do. You get the right person out here that is qualified and they tell you that it's not. I mean, we have a bunch right in our area. Some actually taught at Reading High. So, I'm.
Like Leo Kenny.
Yeah, well, Leo Kenny and
Matt Byrne.
Matt Byrne, yeah. So they're really the 1-2 punch in vernal pools in this area. And so, yeah, someone like that would go a long way cutting that 2-year period down to, a couple meetings.
Well, how about as observed over a period of up to 24 months? If you're looking for this time frame, but we could shorten it by finding evidence in favor of it being a vernal pool sooner, but we could give it a little time to find evidence if we don't have it right away.
Yeah, I mean, I think 24 months is fine. And I think that as long as it's known that they can present findings on their own to overcome this section, then that's also fine. And that's what would be expected. I wouldn't really want to hold anyone to 24 months if they had taken the time to go out there and done a review presented it to the Conservation Commission.
So that would put an additional financial burden on the applicant in that case. I'm not saying that's wrong, but are we okay with that?
It doesn't have to be done. There's a lot of these places that are going to happen where we know that there are vernal pools. It makes sense that they're going to be there. Some of these people come in and say, oh, well, now this puddle in my driveway is a vernal pool. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about these spots that the commission, this body of experts, understands that this is something I want to question. And this allows us to do it.
Right, but my point is for the applicant to counter that. You say, and I agree, we don't want to make them wait 2 years. They can take an action to have somebody go out and look, an expert, find that those pieces of evidence are not there, and that will overcome.
No, unless they didn't contact the Conservation Office, that's probably what they would do. But if they contacted the Conservation Office, they would get a good understanding of where they're at that point. Secondly, they can ask the Conservation Commission during the permit process, and then they have that option that you just talked about. So they don't need to, and really no one comes in here and just accepts what we say. They always have their own version of what's going on, and it's kind of a open dialogue. So
Yeah, I'm fine with this. I want to be careful though that we don't put an unreasonable burden on people if they did want to try and move things forward.
So, sorry. No, you finish.
I think I'm done.
Okay. So in understanding the 24 months, that's to get 2 seasons, like 2 spring, summer seasons?
It's to get, yeah, and if there was a construction project in that same area that you'd want to, and, you know, that activity didn't happen, you'd be able to check the next season too, if this Braille method was the only way that they could do it.
It might be better than to state for 2 seasons, because I think 24 months could actually hold you for almost 3 seasons. If you think about applying for a permit, say in March of the application year, and then you wait 24 months, you're in the 3rd season.
Well, it definitely, yeah, so we just want to make sure it's 2 vernal pool seasons. So they can also miss it and have that happen.
Right, but the point is it's not so much for a 24-month period, but really the important point is that it measured between two spring, summer seasons.
Right.
Cycles.
2 breeding seasons? Amphibian breeding seasons? And those are the seasons we're looking for, right? We're not looking for this fall and this winter. We're looking for spring and the following spring, summer. So that would be breeding
Yeah,
periods.
I think we would tie it to spring and / or summer.
Okay. Seems like everyone's at least in
Doug,
agreement.
I want to make sure I have this, instead of saying over a 24-month period, and instead of saying of up to, you want to say as observed over 2 spring or summer or summer breeding seasons? Would it be spring or summer, or spring and or summer breeding seasons?
I think for a minimum of 2 consecutive months during the spring and or summer, in 2 consecutive years.
What happens in the summer?
That's when they hatch and hop away.
What's part of the 2 months? I guess they're the end of the.
All right.
Catch them at the end. Maybe we're gonna change that part where we're defining, but I think we're good to move forward. And that change could come up when we review it with the residents here.
Okay. And Tony, to address your point about vernal pools can of course be dry, I suggest that, as you know, in section 2C, we already have pond, including vernal pool, whether permanent or intermittent. So I want to suggest in section 3J2, where we say there are small, often shallow ponds, parentheses, whether permanent or intermittent, we restate that language from 2C in 3J2 to sort of capture your point about it can be a vernal pool even if it's dry, if there's other indicia there.
Okay.
Okay.
It's just a point, and I might be getting too far into the weeds, but if it's permanent, would it not then just be a pond? Vernal pool implies.
I'm going with Reading's existing language that we're adding clarity, but that's how Reading currently, this says pond, including vernal pool. It lists all those things, including pond, including vernal pool, whether permanent or intermittent. I would assume the reasoning there was to capture the fact these things sometimes dry up. And it's to expand it
Do dry out.
beyond this thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so you're saying you don't need that in 3J2?
I mean, I think a lot of people use the term vernal pools in just common everyday English to indicate a water body that doesn't have any fish where amphibians and certain insects can reproduce.
Right, and I'm saying Reading decided to say, even if it's intermittent, it might be a vernal pool. I'm assuming that's what they had in mind with that list.
Intermittent, yeah, but
Yeah.
I think a permanent vernal pool is a bit of an oxymoron. And a very strict.
Oh, there's respectfully to Reading, to whoever wrote this, it's not the only one. It's just, it's the language we currently have.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to get the language right, but I think that it wouldn't be hard to decipher that that's not a vernal pool if it was just ponding the whole time, because we'd have bullfrogs in it, you know, because they take a lot longer to go from tadpole to bullfrog.
Mhm.
And they also eat everything. They eat everything that they would find.
All right.
So I don't think that's a problem.
All right, can we move on? 'Cause it's 9:35.
Oh, you channel
All right.
during the dog thing.
We're back to, we're on the last page. This was based on Chuck sharing with us the routine experience certificate of compliance. The applicant shall also provide at that time as-built plans stamped by such a qualified professional. And just to reassure everybody, as-built plans, the reference to them is already in, the term is already used in the regs. So this is nothing new or surprising. It's just to have it here as well. And then lastly, the variance, we had talked about this last time. This was just to make it consistent with the state law, because we can be more stringent than state law, but not less. And the way it's currently written, one could reasonably read it as being less stringent than state law, which is, I'm guessing, not something Reading intended anyway. And that's it.
All right.
And so what I would do within just a few days, Chuck, is obviously removing the highlighting is easy, but per Martha's request,
That's something.
create a red line of the regs as well, showing the changes.
And then with that, it's going to town council. And then back to a public meeting.
Yep.
And so for tonight, we want to like skip some steps. We want Bill to prepare that document, and I want the commission to allow me to send it to, or get permission to send it to town council.
Okay, do we need a vote on that?
Oh, yeah, I'd like that.
Okay, can I have a motion to ask Bill to produce the red line version of these changes and then give it to Chuck to take to town council?
Could we have a version just to proofread before you send to town council, just to have a second set of eyes?
Yeah, I second
Quality control.
Tony, I know we want to push this through, but I would like just to see the new regulations, right, with all the new amendments. I know it's all here. And it make it easier for me to understand how this all fits together before we move it on to town council. But I don't really have a strong opinion on that. I don't really want to slow things down.
That's totally fine, just so everyone understands. There can be no discussing of the document by email. That is to say, we can do it that way, but then we have to, if there's going to be any feedback at all, it has to be at the next meeting.
And my thought is just in my experience, when you're doing red line strikeouts, there sometimes you accidentally include a word or you inadvertently skip a comma just to catch that.
Totally agree with you, but very mindful of the open meeting law. And this is just the kind of thing where it's a gotcha with the commission. Thinking, oh, well, this doesn't fall within the open meeting law, but if it goes to a quorum and we start communicating, it's open meeting law. So
What we're saying is you would create that red line, and rather than just going forward, it would get distributed. And if there were any changes at all, that would require another meeting.
No, it's going to require another meeting no matter what. If you can't vote tonight, for him to send it to me, so I can send it to town council. The commission will have another kick at the cat when town council looks at it, in our public forum to discuss each one of these sections.
That's
It's
fine.
not only the public can make changes, it's the commission. So those are the two options.
I mean, I'd like to have a polished version. I'd hate to send it to town council and then in a public meeting say, oh, we didn't mean to delete this word, or we meant to add that word instead.
Now, some things that you send to us, like the minutes, we can respond to you in an email just to Chuck and not an email to the entire committee. And that's not a problem with open meeting law.
I don't want to touch Bill's document.
Okay.
That's,
Can we reply to Bill only, or does that then?
I think what you need to do is just understand you're gonna go, unless Bill has a different opinion, go to it. this
No,
way.
I
Put it
agree
on
with,
the-
I agree with Chuck. If you're communicating with me, it's open meeting law, so.
Okay, all right, so, what do we want to do? Do you feel strongly enough that you don't want to have it go to the lawyer before it comes back before us at the next meeting?
I'd like to know that what we're sending the lawyer is exactly
What we
what we want the lawyer to review.
Okay, so Bill produced the red line document in time for our October 11th meeting. And we put it on the agenda for October 11th to have one more chance to discuss it before we move on. And then, once we've discussed it on October 11th, then Chuck sends it to the lawyer.
With the expectation that discussion is limited to minor
Typos.
typos and edits and nothing particularly substantive.
Is that what people want? Can I have a motion to that effect? Chuck's looking like that's not what he wants.
I don't vote, but, yeah, no,
I move for Bill to finalize the draft, forward it to the commission for.
I think me and Bill are on the same page, although I think me and Bill are on the same page with this one, right? So, but, outside of that, do you need a vote, or are we just pushing on? This is not really we just decide.
Yeah,
It's just coming.
push it on.
I just would like to know that others feel the same way. So, do you all agree? Is this how you want to do it? Or I think Andy said also, but he also said he didn't want to hold it up. So if you three say we're good to go, then.
And we outvote Tony.
Well, that's, yeah.
Andrew.
And I think there's been ample opportunity to look at this for sure.
Yeah.
And I get your point.
That's
This is a
not the
different
issue.
thing.
That's
This
the
is the process.
issue is the typing into the new document, into the document and making all these red line changes and strike throughs and things like that. And I understand Tony's concern. So I would go with Tony. Walter, what do you want to say?
Can I understand what Chuck's and Bill's objection is to moving forward like that?
I don't see what the mystery is. We've been talking about this for months.
Well, it's true.
And everything is transparent. It basically, it's a difference of opinion. We have them on the commission all the time. It's fine. But I don't see the need for this additional step. It's going to town council. And then it's coming back to us. And, we have to figure out together what we think of what town council said. It's not like we're going to have a public meeting right away. Town council is going to have feedback for us. So anyway, that's my position.
Well, Chuck, you're the one that's going to have to present it. What is your objection to having it done like this?
I just feel like this is getting a little long in the tooth, and very similar to what Bill said. I just think that we could move forward. I feel like, if I was making this copy, I would feel happy that people reviewed it, but I'm not sure the same process needs to happen.
Right, so if I can jump in, we've reviewed the vast majority of this numerous times. The changes we're talking about here are really pretty minor. I don't think that worries Tony at all. We all have seen that Bill is very meticulous, very detail oriented. So what we're protecting against would be the inadvertent miss. Take away a word, doing a strikeout, whatever. So an inadvertent administrative oops. Given that this is not the end game, given that's going to go to a town council before it goes to the town, I think we can take that risk with a presumably qualified professional to let him do what he does for a living and then look at the results. And if there's one of those oopses, which I think is a diminishing likelihood that it happens, then so be it. We can tell the town council, what do you expect from Bill?
Yeah, that's right. I'll take the hit. I mean, going to another lawyer,
Yeah.
it's not a public, it's not going out to the public yet because we have to get town council clearance, have a discussion. Then we have the public meeting.
So we've gone around and around. Let's stop going around. Let's not be the Russian general. Better is the mortal enemy of good enough. This is sufficient to take the next step, I think.
All right, so
That's my position.
we have two. Martha, where do you stand? Given the new dialogue that's out there. 3 seconds.
I'm gonna say the same way we get a copy of the minutes to read before we approve them in our meeting. I would go with Tony to say I'd like to have a copy of the red line version to look at before we approve to send it off to town council. So I'd like it to be sent to us to read over, and then we come back to it on October 11th, and then we send it to town council. And I know it's taking forever, but you know, we don't have a particular deadline on this one, so let's give it 5 minutes on October 11th.
I don't agree with that. But, Walter.
You know
what
of
do
a
you- what do you think?
deadline that we
There's
are,
always a deadline. Applications come in all the time. We've corrected a lot of things here. It's better to have something to back up against and support what we're saying than it is to have a document that can be torn apart by the right staff.
Yeah,
I've been swayed by the two professionals. Let's give it to them to play with.
yeah, me as well. I'll make a motion. This is Annie, that Bill hands over the red line version to Chuck to pass on to town council.
Second it.
I guess, can't vote, or
No, Bill can vote.
Bill can vote? Okay, Bill, you can.
Better vote.
Yeah, in favor, after all, I'm gonna take the hit.
He needs
right?
to
I'm the one
vote.
who'll say,
We
hey,
don't have
blame
it.
me.
Andy?
So in favor.
I am in favor, but just for future, if we ever go through this again, it would be nice to get that copy along with this discussion. But I am in favor.
Andrew, I couldn't agree more, but of course, this is a first time through. So
Yep,
for example,
yep.
if we do substantive stuff in the future, you can bet that
Oh,
in this penultimate meeting, you're gonna have a red line. I totally agree.
Walter?
Walter?
Walter Talbot in favor of Bill completing the work.
Tony Rotalakis against.
Ryan Bowe in favor.
Undecided, but it sounds like it voted in favor, so we're good.
So I don't think there's an objection to putting the red line version on the website like we've been doing with our other app for the commission to look at, or maybe I could just send it out in an email.
Yeah,
So
I'd
you would
rather
have
you
it,
send
but we're not asking for comments until it's back from town council.
Yeah, let's
So you-
not put it
you
on the
can
website yet.
Look,
Don't put it on the website yet,
gotcha. Mhm.
because it's there forever.
All right. All right.
Do we have anything else we need to discuss? All right, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Is Brian to make a motion to adjourn at 9:51, 53, sorry.
Okay, wait a
Do we
second.
have a second?
Second,
Brian- Bill is seconding. Okay, all in favor? Okay, we're adjourned.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Bill, for taking us through this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, for sure.
Good.
Yeah.
Bill, we owe you a beer.
maybe two.
Okay, good night, everyone.
I'm willing to talk about vernal pools some more if anybody wants.
24 hours, 7 days a week.
Drive over.
Catch me Friday afternoon.
All right.
Bye now.
Good night.
That's your point, and I've seen that happen.